Hi guys, welcome back to episode 7. We're
Feels feels like it's just another day, but yeah, we're super excited to be back. It's it's late for wherever Avia is in the world, but he always looks fresh. That's the advantage of being young. And I'm here in Atlanta. Avia's in Delhi. We've had, as always, quite the month. I think it's been what, 3 weeks since we last recorded.
25th, so we're about 3 weeks since we last dropped.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So we
but a
had,
lot of
yeah,
and today's been one of those days where we were in a bit of a model lull, and suddenly everything's coming up together. There's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot that has happened, but the significance of it we don't really truly know till we discover it down the line. There's a lot of things which are out there which are unknowns, from OpenAI, from Anthropic, from where the industry is right now, and everybody's talking about the main trend this month has been security. I personally think it's overplayed.
yeah. I think
That's to be seen.
it's as with everything else, right? The minute the trade papers pick it up, it's like the end of the world.
Yeah.
Uh, I think you and I started looking at it. You've got a name for this section. I think you should because you coined it. I think you should go for it.
So I call it the Claude apocalypse because the days of Claude being happy, go lucky, and being easy to use, and Anthropic having that additional capacity are gone.
Yeah,
Because I think, and the big turning point was the invasion of Venezuela, where they picked up Maduro, and from there, the U.S. media gave it such positive attention that Anthropic has now gone up to 30 billion in revenue. I think they're the leading lab now, AI lab with revenue. To imagine that they've grown 10 times in revenue in a short period like this, it's unbelievable. And
and they're a victim clearly of their success because as any even halfway average practitioner or consumer will tell you, forget practitioner, just people that are using Claude code, even as pro users, not even max users, will tell you that it's not gotten dumber, but it's they're certainly feeling more frustrated with its output, right? So, and obviously, Avya will can write a thesis on this, but it's all about token budgets. It's all about how which parts of Claude actually are. What's the word here? Adaptive thinking, is that the magic thing? There's a
But
term.
it's more than that. That's the thing. Like the adaptive thinking, even I've played around with a lot of this stuff. I've tried to get configs to work, and the main thing is, uh, we have been using Opus 4.5 religiously. We haven't gone to 4.6 because you have to. The main reason for the cloud apocalypse is compute, and what happens is when everybody has a PC at home or everybody has a phone. When your phone gets hot, it starts lagging, right? It starts performing worse. You've done nothing to it. The software hasn't changed, the hardware hasn't changed. It's just the temperature, right? So there's a thermal capacity. And what I
Yeah,
think is because of this additional demand for Claude, there is additional load on the GPUs. They're pushing their GPUs to the limit. They're pushing their TPUs, whatever their infrastructure is, their compute infrastructure. They just don't have enough compute at this moment, and to build out that compute is always going to take time. Like OpenAI in comparison had acquired a lot more compute than Claude did, and the comparison is about 6:1 for OpenAI's compute to Anthropic's. So they're sitting at I think 30 megawatts is what it is, and Anthropic is at 5. I might be wrong that on the megawatt gigawatt what exact wattage of power they
what
have,
you,
but it's a
yeah,
six
yeah,
to
yeah,
one.
what
But
amount
it's
it
a
is.
6:1 ratio. So the problem that is being faced is people are trying all these workarounds to get the model to behave better, but the issue is just that they are starved of compute. Now,
Yeah,
what that's resulting in is, you know, people having worse outputs, people being unhappy, limits of your plan dropping because the models
yeah,
are just currently using more tokens to think, to work. And the main issue is that, Anthropic has this tendency of trying to hold on to what they have. It's OpenAI, in a funny way, is more open. You can use any harness you want with your Codex auth.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You can do anything you want, and they're very open in that way. And Codex CLI is also open source. So in a way, the thing that's happening is that Anthropic's turning out to be this bad guy, when it is a lot of things happening at once. I still think they have
Yeah,
a
I
great.
mean, I don't think I'm ready to call Anthropic the bad guy. I still think that, their stand against the Pentagon and what they did with, basically telling Pete Hegseth, this Secretary of Defense. Again, we don't want to turn this into a political podcast at all, but I think some of the stands they've taken are commendable, right? In spite of basically potentially being blacklisted by the U.S. government and just whatever. So there, to me, it seems to me like their commitment to safety and, let's say, the preservation of humanity is still solid, and we'll come to that because that's a whole section which we'll come to in a few minutes. Uh, this section really, we just want to talk about how the bloom is off the rose, the facade has fallen. It's we were all in love with Claude. We all fell in love, and we knew that this honeymoon was just that. It wasn't gonna last. Eventually, no matter who it is, whether it's a new relationship, um, the kind of starry-eyed feeling that Avya and I had when we were recording in February or late January, that's
As
gone. But
quickly
it's
gone away.
not it's I wouldn't call myself a disillusioned necessarily. I've become more sort of realistic, and again we'll come to what's happening and which one of our predictions was right or wrong from January this year, which feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, it
But
feels like it's been 3 years.
yeah, exactly. But my sense is just that uh, Claude has gotten again, like I said, it's a victim of its own success, but they've not done a really good job sort of managing expectations and also being a good sort of being transparent about whether Claude is behaving well or not. So I have had at least 3 or 5 instances over the last 3 weeks where I'm sort of in the flow state. I'm working with Claude code, and I start seeing 500, internal server error, right? That's literally
A lot of them.
backend 101, right? You don't ever expose dumb errors like that. And then you're like, okay, what's happening? Have I lost my internet? No, my internet's okay. Have I run out of tokens? Well, guess what? I can't even get my status because the entire Claude AI backend is down. And the funniest thing is that if you go to status.claude.com when that is happening, it doesn't
Half red.
update.
It's
It
like a
doesn't update for
colorblind test.
10 minutes. 10
It's
minutes.
like, and it's a colorblind test. Like, I'm colorblind and I can't tell because it goes red, green, red, green, red, green. So I can't tell if it's been down or not. And
That's on purpose, I'm sure. But yeah, they don't tell you. And then they'll say things like major outage reported, issues reported, actively working on this. There's no postmortem. There's no, guys, we effed up. This is what happened. It's all trust us. We've got this under control. Everything's going to be back to normal. So it started to feel a little bit like either as you point out, they're genuinely running out of compute capacity, and they don't have. For them to admit that that's what's happening is maybe what they feel is they're going to lose a lot more people. But I, as a genuine believer in Claude, I really want them to succeed. I think they're one of the better platforms. They're probably the best one out. Be more open and transparent. It's much better. Always, it's always a better strategy in the long run. If you want
yeah,
basically to have a
you
long
should
term
give people
relationship with the
you
brand,
should
with the
give people
customer,
that
give people
openness.
the benefit. Don't insult people's intelligence. So that's been my thing. And then the other thing, just tied to that, is for me personally an evolution that I've had. And I think I told you this to you, but again, you and I haven't really spoken that much over the last few days because you've been in Delhi and our clocks are a little bit off.
That's a bit, yeah. Like, it's a thing of 12
You're
hours.
9 hours ahead now, um,
Yeah.
but I think till about 1 week ago, I had the pretense of saying, okay, like I'm just going to be. I was treating Claude Code like a very smart, but still a junior level engineer. And
Yeah.
I think I started, my mental switch happened. It was a trust thing, but my mental switch happened late last week. And it was probably triggered by the fact that I couldn't work during the day with this thing. Like during the day from 12 p.m. Eastern till about 6 p.m. Eastern, it's almost impossible to get a long, 50 turn or 5 or 10 or 15 turn session with your Claude Code, right? I mean, it's a coin toss. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Maybe you'll get good results. Even if you don't see any errors, you will notice at the back of your head, you're like, am I going crazy, or has it gotten a little dumber? And now we know under the covers they're basically throttling. They're doing all sorts of little tricks to just keep up.
I do. That Sid, that's the thing. I don't think they're doing it on purpose, because a lot of it, and read a lot about this, and I looked into it because I deep dived. Because the one thing, the Claude apocalypse that's happening is that the limits are going down on the max plans and the pro plans. And the thing is, people, one thing I want to tell everyone is, you have to understand these are highly subsidized plans.
Yes,
Even if Anthropic is banking on the fact, like a gym membership, they bank on the fact that 90% of people will not be able to utilize the gym membership.
that's a really good
These that
analogy. I love it. Yeah,
and that's the whole thing behind these subscriptions. And the thing is, these limits are very generous, right? They may last, they may not last. But
yes,
what I am telling you is that we are getting highly subsidized tokens, right? Whatever it costs them, we don't know, but I know this much is that we're getting more than we're paying for.
that's
And
right.
it might be a factor of 5, it might be a factor of 10, and people are going out and putting figures there which you cannot verify. You can compare it to the API pricing, but you don't know what they're making of it and what it costs them and what it is at the bottom of it.
Yeah,
And
I mean you're right, but it is, yeah, it is absolutely true that that even at $100 price point, forget 100, forget 200, at a $500 price point, which is presumably what Mythos is going to be, if I'm able to use it and get even to a 2 to 3x sort of thinking improvement from a pure sort of software development perspective, that's cheaper than anyone can offer. Like, whether it's Eastern European, crack squads, or Indian companies or Filipino companies, nobody's going to be able to match that rate, right? Nobody,
no, no.
nobody, right? So software development has forever been changed. Anyway, I just want to come back to what my evolution has been. To your point, I think those two things have now clicked in my head. One is that I trust Cloud Code like I maybe would be trusting an employee that I've just onboarded and now trained, and I'm now comfortable with their output. That I say to them, okay, now go off and do this and come back to me when it's done, and then you and I will figure out how to basically
How to
debug
fix
or
it?
figure out what you've done wrong. But I'm not going to tell you on a turn by turn basis what to do. So what I did last week for the first time ever was I disabled permissions. So I did the dangerously bypass permissions. Oh, but before I did that, I thanks again. We'll come to the Mythos event, but thankfully I decided before that to. And this is something, by the way, that we cannot stress enough. I've been telling everybody I meet now, and I'm going to basically maybe make this into a headline. This should be like a public service announcement. Please, 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 if you are trying to do anything with coding agents, at the very least, create essentially just a dummy login. Like create
Yeah.
an OS level separation between the work you're doing, okay,
And all your information.
and the login which all of us have, right? Remember, like we're all lazy. I was lazy. I'm guilty as charged. I had like one account where all my net banking, all my secrets, all my deepest darkest secrets, all my family album photos, everything was there. Okay, I realized a few days after that episode, or the Mythos and the Glasswing thing, which we'll cover in a second, that dropped. It was my oh shit moment. I was like, okay, I'd better stop doing it. Of course, I'm smart enough not to install OpenClaw on my machines yet. I mean, but I said, look, this is risk is too high. Even Anthropic, even though with their security focus, can be hacked. So please, 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 please create a separate user, give that user no permissions at all, install Claude Code, so you're at least getting the OS level protection, right? In a perfect
Well,
world, you would actually
you
have
know,
sorry,
you just it's like, how you just partition your drive. You
you
should just
partition your
partition
drive.
it.
Yeah. Yeah,
You need
yeah.
to
So in your
partition.
basic, yeah, think of it
It's
as
a,
basically working with radioactive materials, right? You don't want to
it's like a
bring them
Docker
into your living
container.
room.
It's like a Docker container. You're running it in a Docker container, but it's a
Correct,
special.
right. But you're not bringing it into your living room. You're basically working it inside your barn, right? And ideally, you can truly isolate it by basically putting it into like a facility, secure facility. If you're truly security focused and you've got a lot of money to lose, I don't, not today at least. So there you could potentially just put it into into a separate MacBook Pro, isolate the hell out of it, maybe even put it behind a separate
Use Mac
firewall.
Mini maybe. Mac Mini.
Exactly,
Mac.
that's what I meant. I meant a Mac Mini. So yeah, yeah. So having said all that, it's a roundabout way. I'm coming to my point, which I'll make, is that I created the separate user, and then and only then did I start using Ralph loops. So I've been using Ralph loops since last Thursday now, and now my typical day goes the following. I basically think about all I'm going to do. Then before I go to sleep at night, which is around 10:30 p.m. Eastern, I will initiate a Ralph loop and then I'll go to sleep. And the next morning, usually the Ralph loop runs about 7 or 10 or maybe 15, 12 iterations. It goes till about 3 in the morning, maybe one or two. So like about 3.5 hours is how much it runs sort of unguided, sort of unaided. And then it stops. And what I've found is that if I don't give it, as long as I'm not giving it too confusing of a prompt, it's pretty good. Like it's fairly good. And of course, we're using all the tricks that we've learned. We've asked it to basically um, split everything up into phases. We'll talk about adversarial review in a separate section. We'll get to that in a second, but how critical that is now. And so all of those things, if you're able to keep that hygiene sort of factor up, the code it's generating is actually pretty good. Now, the next thing for me is I don't look at the code anymore. I'm not looking at the code anymore. And that's on purpose. It's not because I'm confident in Claude's ability. It's that I think this is the world we live in now. We cannot get the benefit of these coding agents if we keep becoming the bottleneck. So I was the bottleneck, which is what I realized, which is why I took myself out of the loop, which is what the Ralph loop enabled me to do. And I think increasingly this is what's going to happen, right? So it'll be about creating very strong input and output gates to your coding agent. So your input gate is how well you give it what kind of prompt you give it on the input side, and your output gate is how rigorous your end-to-end tests are. As long as these two are solid, don't worry about what's happening on the inside. Trust the process.
Yeah. So I mean, moving from all of this that we've said about the Claude apocalypse, the way things have changed, the Ralph loops and the security concerns, we should move on to the biggest topic of the last week, which has been security, cybersecurity, and that comes
Yes,
from
yes.
the launch of Mythos preview. Now, I have some thoughts on this, but before I give my thoughts, I just want to outline what Mythos is if you haven't heard about it. Mythos is apparently Anthropic's new model, which is twice or maybe three times as big as Opus, and it is supposed to handle 0-day exploits. And it's supposed to be unbelievable at finding these exploits and patching them. And FMPEG said that the code that it generated was indistinguishable from their best developers. So
I'll stop you for a second. FFmpeg is the Fraunhofer Institute. They are the guys who developed the MP3 MP4 standard. So these are literally this is like this is like John Lennon saying that the songwriting ability of this code, if it was a songwriter, is as good as any they've seen. So this is how good FFmpeg is. Just for context, please continue.
So what they were saying is that the code was indistinguishable from any of their code that they had written. And they have code hygiene, they have these protocols, they have standards, and they have been the standard for a long time. Now, what I feel is come from this over the next week after we've heard about Mythos is everybody has started realizing that the biggest issue is because they didn't release it to us and they said it's a security concern. Now, what people have slowly started to realize is that if you go back far enough, you see that every model has had this thing that, Opus, when it came out, it was too dangerous to release. It's too dangerous to release. And what a lot of the frontier researchers of AI, and there are ethical hackers, there are hackers on the internet. They said that, okay, I found these same exploits without knowing where they were, using a Gemma model, or I used a Quen model. And this is all over Twitter. You will be able to find it, you will be able to see it. And what they're saying is that Anthropics may be overstating it, and they're trying to play too much into the cards of, okay, we do not have the compute to service this model. And on the backs of that, yes, I mean, they've
That
priced
is
it
such
at.
an interesting theory. That's the first, but it's interesting. You can actually draw a straight line to them saying, "Shit, we're not ready to release this because it's going to kill our compute. So we might as well pretend to be like good citizens, and just say, oh no 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 no, we care about humanity too."
And then GPT 5.4 Cyber came uh, just yesterday. And you can apply for access. They just want, they want to be able to track what you're doing. But the thing is, these cyber models, I understand cybersecurity, and I'm understanding all of these exploitations, and there are issues which are present. But I think the security thing is overplayed for the fact that they cannot afford to serve this model, because the model is priced at 5 times what Opus is. You're paying 5 times more for this model on API pricing, which is only available to select partners. Now, to put it into reference, they have a model which is Opus 4.6 fast, which is even more expensive than Mythos. It's 6 times as expensive as Opus for twice the speed. So, what I'm trying to say is that I understand where they're coming from, I understand why they're doing it, and I understand what is going to trend next. Now, GPT OpenAI has a new model called Spud, codename Spud. They're naming it GPT 5.5. They're naming it Cyber, whatever it is. And it's launched something for healthcare today called Rosalind. So, which is there. And I'm saying that OpenAI is going to bank on this stuff and say that our model is also too dangerous to release. Because the thing is, at a point, they do not want you to have the best thing. It is like every single company has done. And I'll give you the Tupperware analogy. The reason Tupperware went out of business is because their product was too good. You never need to buy it again. And that's what's happening. Like, if you create a model which does everything to a level, it is that golden, that, like, that limit of elasticity.
Yeah,
Post that limit, it doesn't matter. It's just diminishing returns then. There
yeah.
is no, but that peak, we are climbing to that peak. And right now, we're not there. And that's what I believe is the true thing, that compute is the bottleneck, and that these models are too good for them to strain. That the strain from compute is going to be too much, because everybody will want to use them no matter the price. It's that golden ratio which you reach eventually.
Yes. I think that's a great point. And in fact, again, I have to now process what you've just said. And I didn't think about it this way. But yes, it's certainly a very cynical view, and it requires a little bit of a sort of a context switch, really, and your worldview switch by saying, oh, this is just them trying to, put some put some brakes on this crazy adoption that they might have started to see on their own. Um,
Yeah.
I think the reality is probably a combination of everything, right? It's a combination of them saying, okay, we want to basically fight a PR battle. We are on the back foot. We've won some early victories against the Trump administration. So Trump administration, actually the Pentagon blacklisted them. They got that order stayed, but
Yes.
it's not out of the courts yet. So I think what they're trying to also do is win the battle of win the public square battle. Essentially just litigate this in the court of public opinion. And I think they come across as the good guys if they say, look, we are voluntarily foregoing the potential revenue that we might get with this amazing model because we care too much about security, and that's why we're only releasing it to all the Project Glasswing is their big initiative where they've got. I
They've
mean,
given
it's
it to the top companies.
you have to give it to them. It was very nicely produced. It was like clearly Hollywood production values. but they had people from Cisco. I can't even. I lost track. I mean, obviously there was Palo Alto.
It's Apple, AWS,
I
FFM,
mean,
Mac,
all the usual suspects were
all the
saying,
top, all the top.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was almost like there's a, it's like basically there's a comet, there's a meteor on its on a collision course, and this is the group of heroes that are the Avengers are going to save you. So thank you very much. But what I do want to also say is related to all of this. I feel like there's some opportunistic and maybe again some cynical steps that have been taken by certain interesting open source and popular open source projects. So one open source project I specifically want to call out. This is thanks to my colleague Guinness, who does a lot of work and he believes in open source even more than I do. Is he sent me, he uses something called cal.com, which is an open source version of Calendly. Calendly is, if you remember, it's that silly thing which lets you let people book time on your
on
calendar.
your on your
But it's a
calendar. Yeah.
it's it's a service, right? People pay for it. But then there's open source versions of everything. So cal.com has always been open source. They do have a paid version, and 3 days ago, they announced that they were going closed source, which is shocking in and of itself. But their reason is even more interesting. They said, we care about our user base, our paid user base enough and too much to essentially give away the blueprint to projects like to AI like Mythos to find and exploit vulnerabilities, as if Mythos and all the white hats out there have nothing better to do than to basically find vulnerabilities in an open source project. Fine, okay, I'll give you that. But I do feel like, again, somewhat of a cynical view and somewhat of a cynical step by the Cal guys. If you were going to close source something, be honest about your intentions. It feels to me like their intentions were, we want to close source because we don't want people forking our repo and starting to compete with us. That's it. That was the reason why Terraform went closed source or business source. That's the reason why a lot of these companies are doing it. You start looking at some of these license terms now in the open source repo, and they are increasingly starting to feel and look a lot more complicated. From the one paragraph MIT license, Apache license, GPL, LGPL, you now have all sorts of interesting exclusions, all the licensing that you see. So
Yeah,
um,
and a lot of this is coming up with now open source. You look at
in
these
open
open source
source,
models. Minimax M2.7, you cannot. There's no licensing for it. I think you cannot run it. You can't use it commercially.
you can't
So
use it
they
commercially. Yeah,
they're not giving you an MIT license or an Apache license to be able to use it. So it's not
yeah,
truly an it's an open weight model, but it's not open source in the sense that it's not, you can't build on top of it, right? And you can't productize it.
yeah,
Which is, I mean, I think, and what we wanted to talk about with Mythos, Glasswing, and how all of this is, a lot of this is causing open source to not change its definition. Essentially,
yeah,
how we define open source is now categories. It's not just open, and nothing is becoming just open. And we can see that, like, even though the, let's say, the Codex CLI is open source, now they got the Codex app, they've got all of this stuff. They are restricting a lot of the tools which go into the open source aspect of it. You can build on top of the Codex CLI, but there's a lot of stuff behind it which makes it run. So
yes, yes,
they sections of things are becoming open source, but
that's
I
right.
think how open source is evolving is that we need a little bit more clarity on the fact that, okay, is this completely open source, or is this like a piece of the pie? Because you can have a bite of the pie, but you don't
Yeah,
know
absolutely. And it's
that the
also
rest.
interesting how these licenses are now getting more and more interest. They'll start to carve out exclusions and they'll say you can use it for personal use or community use, but not for commercial. And how does community and commercial get differentiated? Community is 1, 2, 5 people, 20 people, right? Are you setting it up as a local server? So I think, as you said, as you rightly point out, this is not going to get addressed or sorted out overnight. I feel like there's some interesting thoughts that, again, I'm developing along with some of my other collaborators, and we believe, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Abhya, but like we believe that actually what's going to end up happening is the specs themselves, like the Claude.md or the agents.md, or essentially the instructions, the recipes, which are typically now going to just become markdown files.
Yeah, I'll be the markdown.
Those might stay open source, but what's definitely going to not stay open source is the specific implementations. And I think, as you point out, there might be some unique tips and tricks, trade secrets, if you will, that the users, the guys who are actually running something as a service, will say, look, we're going to keep that secret. If you want, you can take our open source specs and feed it into a coding agent, Claude, Codex, whatever you choose, and you'll get some semblance of functionality similar to what we have, but it's not going to be the same. So I think that's probably where open source is heading. And yeah,
I have a thing on that, and I think it's very interesting because I think we can talk about it as skills, right? This is a very interesting aspect, and I think skills, hooks, and let's start with what we call a session context, what we've
yeah,
built. I can give everybody those skills. They're open source. They're on my GitHub repo. Under Claude Code, you can go and view those skills, and we've pasted them in the description in the last episode, so you can go and use them and
yeah,
try them out. But the thing is, what I can't translate is my workflow and why I
yes,
use things, how I use them. Now, even though you're using the same skills as I am, Sid, you have a slightly different way of using those
yeah,
skills, right? And
yeah,
we look at it slightly differently. So I'm saying that open source aspect, that thing, it's like everybody likes to sit on a chair slightly differently. That's why there's the adjustability, right?
that's right.
And that how you adjust your chair or your car seat is unique to you. Nobody else will like it the way you sit in it.
That's
And
true.
trying to get it back is very difficult. So that's what it's like, building on it. So all of these open source tools and everything that's coming around, but one thing I feel with it is it's going to improve a lot, but the thing is it can take you backwards because everybody is trying to chase the extra 1% with these open source tools, and everybody's building very quickly. And one thing I'm proud of, which we've been doing very carefully, is stress testing the bugs on our
Yes, yes,
app. And one thing which has come out really big, and there's this guy, he's called Theo T3. He's the founder of T3 Chat. He's quite known in the open source community and generally in the AI community. And he says that I don't think Mythos and Claude are that good because I've seen the app, and the Claude Code desktop app came, and he's like, there's 40 bugs in it. And he
yeah,
said one of the biggest issues is that people are shipping so quickly and they're not hardening. And
yes,
that's one rule which was very specific to us. And I said, no matter what it is, if it's open source, it's proprietary, we should harden. And
yes.
that as you said, that the people are going to leave something out in the open source, or there's some trick they used or some way they got to it to get from point A to point B. There might be a secret trick they used, and
Absolutely. And to be fair, open source was never truly open in that sense. And the reason I say that is because there was always some unique things, and like you said, tips and tricks of deploying,
of
or
deploying.
or configuring, that were left unsaid or not unpublished. And remember that Red Hat was a very successful business before they were bought by IBM, 20 years ago. I think it was 20 years ago. It was a long time ago. And The reason they were successful was because even though they were completely open source, they were built on top of the Linux kernel. Business users didn't have the time or the skills to worry about patching security vulnerabilities, right? And with an open source system, you have to basically care over all that stuff. So I think software as a service evolved out of one flavor of software service evolved in that way. I think open sourcing now is almost a moot point, as we now know, because you hit a button and you can have Claude Code generate stuff out of a spec file in 10 hours or 5 hours, right? Like, you can generate hundreds of thousands of lines of code, at the rate per day, right? So
Yeah.
generating code is no longer the bottleneck anymore. Generating debug code is also probably not. as slow as you might think. You might be able to get fully hardened and debugged code within a week. So you might.
I think, and that to the point, like we found a lot of ways to do it, and I think that as much as we rely on models, I think one thing I've found and we have discovered what through our hardening and everything is the over reliance on models is getting very dangerous, and
Yes,
people are
yes, 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 absolutely. And that's a segue to the segment C, right? Our third segment.
and that's what I want to get to is that okay, bug finding is the number one issue with Opus
Hmm.
because even if I give it, say, if I have a bug finder agent, which we have in our skills, and we have the bug finder refiner, we have multiple different code based exploration agents which are there to find bugs. One thing is that Claude is not using it. It's
Hmm.
not using it. So it doesn't
Its
understand the
behavior is
bugs.
not consistent. That's the one thing I don't like about it. Even though it's a harness, it doesn't consistently follow its own sort of memory.md and Claude.md files. So there's ground truths that it ignores, and I think we generally tend to look the other way. But I find it funny because I've told it to always use some subagent, and I've created. I think you and I have created like 15 different types of functional subagents. But at least I find myself. What's that? Yeah, it's just someone who gets to basically do that, and it's surprising to me. And anyway, I think we want to talk more about. I think we spent half this podcast talking about Claude. I think the one thing we now want to say primarily is that Codex, GLM 5.1, and others are catching up. The gap is actually narrowing. And what we're now finding, which has been obvious for a while, is that certain coding models are actually better at certain things, and there's this unique, almost like a complementary thing going on. You should talk about. You can talk way more about this than I, and I think you should take the lead describing,
I'll so what
personality and adversarial review and subagents and your workflow, because I think it's just spot on. This is exactly how it should all be done now.
So when you break down a problem, an engineering problem, let's say software engineering now, the thing is everybody has an issue of tunnel vision, and nobody can be blamed for it, right? You get into the zone, you focus, you get tunnel vision, and when somebody else points out that okay, maybe this can be done a different way, it clicks in your head. You're like, oh my god, I never saw that. Let me try it that way, and that's what it is. And there's a very famous Elon Musk interview, and he was talking about how they had done something to the boosters, and the interviewer said, is it just for the boosters? And then Elon Musk's thing clicked, and we've done it we have to do it for the main rocket as well. Now that way of thinking has inspired me because as soon as I was able to, so this is about 2 months
Did this
ago.
really happen, by the way? Elon Musk
Yeah, this
live,
was a this,
he
and
clicked
he
because you
and
can
it
see
clicked.
something in his mind going like that.
Yeah, so he was like, because he's so focused on just getting the booster right, he was like, the main fuselage isn't doing this. So then he
Interesting.
was like, okay, yes, this fits everywhere else. And now that's the power of an adverse serial agent or
Adversarial
a
review.
review
Yeah.
agent. And
Yeah.
I think as long as I've been doing this, I have about 2.5 months now, I've been using Codex as a reviewer. So I think Codex is a much more thorough agent. It has a much better personality when it comes to sticking to the task. Even
Hmm.
though it will tell you a lot of the times that it's wrong, and and it's very rigid, it is rigid in the right ways.
Yeah.
Now I
It's
think
pedantic.
that
It's more pedantic. It's way more pedantic than I think Anthropic is. And I think Anthropic, by their own admission, has said that okay, you've said this yourself. So Anthropic's more of like a get shit done. That's their thing, right? And
they
Claude
want
is
to
more
ship quick.
let's do this the right way.
They want to do they want to ship stuff fast, and what and our thing and what our findings were. And I told Sid before he moved on to Codex, one day Claude wasn't working, so he went to Codex, and I told him it's like a senior engineer. It's very
Hmm.
thorough, but it also gets in its trap of perfection. It can
Yes.
get into a perfection loop, and it has certain bad habits. I do not like how it writes functions, so that's why I don't use it for a lot of work. It's very good at a lot of things,
Yeah.
And particularly debugging, fixing issues, corrections is where I found that Codex is head and shoulders above anything there. And I think the way it does tests, the way it fixes things is very good. So that's why we have been using something known as the Codex MCP server and a Codex subagent through Codex CLI in Claude Code. And what this allows us to do is, let's say we built a beautiful plan. Now I get Claude and Codex to come to a middle ground and find gaps in each other's plan. What that allows you to do, it allows you to pre-harden the plan, right? Because one model looks at it one way, the other model looks at it the other way. When both inputs are given, you find the gaps being filled. It's not perfect, but it helps a lot in the long run. Now, as we said, Anthropic likes to ship things very quickly, and Opus's personality is, I'm going to just build it all out, and okay, there might be some gaps, but I'll fill it in later. Now, what the Codex agent in the middle can do is, it at each step, at each task, make sure that that task is hardened and completed. So what you get at the end of the day is a feature which is working, and it is hardened from the start. So there's a lot less debugging to do. There's a lot less issues with it. And because the plan is so concrete and you're reviewing it each step, what happens is you're getting an outside view, similar to what that reporter did, right? It just allows each agent to think from a different perspective, and it's like a pooled resource. It's why how Sid and I also work. When we're working on things, I give one input, Sid gives one input, and we just see things differently, and it allows us to come together. Like, we have similarities, we have differences, and I think that's the most important thing of it. It's not about what model you're using. As we said, we tried out GLM 5.1, and we'll come to that in a little bit of why it was so good. But I think the most important aspect of it, and a lot of the AI world is catching on to it now, is that you must do a Codex review, is that you should have a reviewer agent or something to look over what you've done and how the implementation is going.
Absolutely. And
Because
to reinforce that, I think the current my current flow is because now I what essentially I do is I tell Claude to create a prompt for the Ralph loop where I say, for the first iteration of your Ralph loop, I want you to create the plan. In the second iteration of the Ralph loop, I want you to have Codex review the plan and fix it. I mean, take whatever Codex tells you to do and fix it. The third iteration is the implementation. The fourth iteration is Codex reviewing the implementation and applying fixes. So it's like a two step. You basically have Claude do something and Codex do something. I can easily see this kind of thing being expanded. I have another friend of mine who told me the other day that he actually has two different adversarial reviews. That might be overkill, but to each his own, right? So you've got basically a Gemini subagent and a Codex subagent doing it all together. At some point, you start to diminish. The law of diminishing return kicks in. I think we found our sweet spot is Claude does the coding, Claude does the sort of quick and dirty get shit done. Codex comes and refines it, and maybe does fixes
and
bugs.
and we can add one more thing to it. And what I feel like saying is, okay, certain changes I prefer on Claude. I can't tell you, it's more of a just a feel thing. If I have a change with, let's say there's some bug which has appeared, I will give it to Claude, but I want Codex to identify it, because Codex can identify it and give a much better detailed description of the
Yeah,
bug, right? But I
yeah,
like how Claude writes the code. Like, a lot of people prefer the way Codex is writing code, for backend purposes specifically. They say it's a much better coding agent. But I find that, the code Claude is writing is a lot more usable for me to debug and to work with and build on top of. And whatever we built, um, the hardening we've done is been able to, because we've used this workflow. I've tried it the other
that's
way around. It doesn't work as well. I don't think Opus is as good of a reviewer. I think it's a much better implementer. What Codex allows it to do is, it holds it on a string and says, okay, do this. And it's very specific.
it
So
is.
you're solving the issue of, Opus being a little overeager, with Codex being extra strict. And, you find this middle ground.
You find a middle
I,
ground.
and I
Now,
think,
granted, I have to say that our code has not been. We don't. I wouldn't call our code production in production yet. Actually, I do have code that's in production. That's I would say 80% generated through coding agents, but it's still, I wouldn't consider it under heavy usage. Uh,
Yeah.
a lot of this is, again, we are trying to be as transparent as as possible here. There is obviously real hurdles and shortcomings and problems, especially for companies that have an install base of customers who are looking to basically transition to this. This is by no means an easy problem to solve. Everybody's still trying to solve it. We'd love to hear from folks who are actually facing real issues. If you have specific instances of where you completely think that this is a bad idea, of where you maybe can ask. If you, we'd love to help. I mean, essentially, we think this is the best thing since sliced bread, but frankly, we're not really selling as many versions of it. So, what do we know about scale yet? So, again, my gut, and I think Avya's gut is saying this is how it's all going to be pretty soon. I mean, and we've seen it get better over the last. We've been very close to it, and we've seen it improve literally every day for the last 12 months, and that improvement has been exponential. So it's already pretty good. It's already, I would say, the equivalent of 5 or 6 engineers working, essentially having a squad of people. You don't actually need squads anymore. I'll say it now. And it's a pretty radical thing to say, but you can replace squads now. You can replace front end, back end design, database. 4 people, one Claude.
I, I and more than all of this, I think what we've built, and soon it'll be very live for everybody to try. And I think we should talk a little bit about it because it helps us. What GLM is, we've actually developed a RAG agent builder, which will be able to use on our website. And if you go to the movingtarget.ai, you will be able to sign up and build your own RAG agents pretty quickly. And the thing is, we have built this from an idea, but it's a lot of our knowledge on why the best underlying implementation of RAG, right? What given us repeatable results. And we want it to be accessible to everyone, so we've made it very simple to use. And we have worked on this with Claude, GLM, and Codex. And yeah, it was 2 days ago. Me and Sid, I just said, let's give GLM a shot. You want to try something else. And I'll let Sid expand on why he liked GLM and what
Yeah,
it's
no,
shown.
it's now starting to feel like they're all getting really good. It used to be, oh, you could tell when you were test driving Codex, or no, you were actually using Claude code, and then you just there was this feeling that, and we'll come back to our prediction segment in a second, but it felt like, okay, we're never going back. This is how it's all going to be done. But now you have OpenCode, where you can, it's literally, you have this laundry list of really performant coding agents available, including Codex. You have Codex CLI itself, which will actually give you, I believe, at least GPTs, but also some others. So Codex on its own is now letting you sort of bring in GLM if you want to, if you like the harness part of it. And Claude Code by itself is Claude Code. So it's sort of your, let's say Claude Code is your primary workhorse car, then driving your Codex and GLM feels like an Audi or a BMW. They're both great cars. They drive really well. They get you from point A to point B. So I'm really starting to feel like it's really one of those. Well, for me personally, when I'm frustrated, if I have more than one Ralph loop to run. In fact, I did this 2 nights ago or 2 days ago. I had multiple Ralph loops running, but I didn't run them with the same coding harness. I had a Ralph loop running on Codex, and I had another one running on Claude. I haven't yet tried to run three in parallel, but it's all doable, right? It's all possible. I
Yeah,
can
it's all
potentially do
doable.
that. I think I don't want to have multiple Ralph loops running on the same backend, because I know that I'm going to run out of my Max Pro
Yeah.
Max tokens quickly, because the thinking tokens really get used up quickly. And I think there's some weird compounding happening that they haven't really figured out yet. So I had this one instance where I had my entire 5 hour budget, which I've never run out of, in my 2 months using it. I ran out of it within an hour, and I couldn't figure out why that happened. And then I asked Claude to figure it out, and it said, "Oh, your Ralph loop got somehow complicated, and then I was sending it back into the loop, and every turn was costing us 300, 100,000 tokens. Okay, well, that shouldn't have happened, but it did. So, so be careful with this stuff. It's super powerful, and it's not going to blow your leg off. It's just going to make your coding agent reset, and you'll have to wait for 4 hours before the
And I think one main point from our discovery of GLM is that the Claude apocalypse has happened, and we think it's opened our eyes to try something else, because eventually you will uh, relate to these open weight and open source models where you can utilize them, and eventually there will be capabilities to rent a GPU. Now you can rent a GPU as low as 1 cent per hour. So I mean, eventually you will be able to control your compute and control what model you're serving. So I think eventually you have to realize, and this is the most important part, is you can't rely on one provider, which is what we said 6 months ago, and we kind of lost sight of that with Claude. But I think you should have maybe one primary Max subscription and then two $20 subscriptions,
yeah.
the
I
Codex
think
and GLM at something, just to have a backup. If Claude is down for an hour, you can't pause. There's important work to do. But I think as long as your workflows are strong, as long as you have rules and you stick to those rules, you can use any of the models. They're not that far off. For the hyper complex stuff, I'd say stick to Codex and Opus, because they have that extra intelligence. But day-to-day tasks, implementation of basic stuff, fixing things, you can, because you have the knowledge, you can use any of them.
this is really a really good point, and I think I want to stress here how again, another shout out to my friend Pablo, who's really pushing what he likes to call spec driven development. And he's saying, what's eventually going to happen, what's already happening, is you're going to move away from, in just the same way as people are no longer writing code. Remember what you just said, right? You and I, when we write code now, it's all stored in the claude.md and the memory.md and the turns and maybe even the ralph loop. It's a bunch of markdown files. Now, if Claude were to go down tomorrow and not come back for a week, I don't want to be stuck. And the only way that I can prevent that from happening is by creating almost a coding agent agnostic definition of what I'm doing, and effectively like it's a bunch of
Like a collection.
recipes.
Like a collection.
It's a collection of recipes, but it's a markdown, right? It's specs. So again, whether you want to call it specs, they are literally the things that you feed into these coding harnesses, whether it's OpenCode or Codex CLI or Claude CLI, or Claude Code, and you're literally able to transfer them from one to the next. So the test is, and I've done this before, I've already done this. This is really interesting. I don't think I shared this with you, but I had Claude Code write me the Ralph loop prompt, and then I decided I'm going to have Codex implement the Ralph loop, and it worked. So I think this is something you realized, is that Codex and everybody else will read your Claude.md, but Claude.md, again, because they're the leader, they're the front runner.
Agents and Claude.
They
So
won't
it's
read agents.md
easy for
unless you
everyone
ask them.
else.
Yeah, so they're like the front runner. They're a bit like, I remember this from way back. Oh my god, this is really going to take me back, and I'm dating myself again. When I'm trying to remember when Facebook came out after Gmail,
Yeah.
when Facebook so when Facebook came out, you could import all your Gmail contacts into Facebook, and it would automatically match them, because everybody was using, most people were using Gmail at the time, and your Facebook ID was usually linked to your Facebook, your Gmail account, and it was a great way to discover friends. But then when
Yes.
Google started to create their own competitive, short-lived uh, network, I even forgot what it was called at the time. Facebook wouldn't let you export your friend list as a list of Gmails or anything,
Wow.
and I found
Wow.
that really interesting. But it's kind of like what's happening right now with Claude and the rest of the field. Claude is too good to read other coding harnesses markdown files, but other coding harnesses markdown files will read everything in the .claude folder.
And
They'll
I
they'll read
think
it and ingest it and they'll start working on
I'll tell you what it is. It's first mover. It
it. It
is
is first
classic.
mover. Yeah, it is. It
I
is.
think if OpenAI had come up with a codex before Claude Code had existed, they would have done the same thing. It would have been a open.md or an openai.md or codex.md. Because I think a lot of this which is happening is back and forth.
Yeah.
If Claude does something, OpenAI does something else to make themselves look better. It's a two-man race. But
Which is great because we all benefit from that, right? It's always good to have competition. Competition keeps everybody honest, keeps prices low. So we all benefit from it. Anyway, yeah. So this is we could keep going on and on about all of
I
our
think
little.
I think to close off this segment, we should just have a couple of points which we think are important. I say, look at OpenCode. It's very good. It's a very good harness. It's strength. It's the most strengthened out of all three, I think. Um, Please look at some of the open source models for coding. Even look at the smaller Quen models. They're doing a good job. You know, I'm saying these models can do very complex tasks, and the thing is, we have a bad habit of getting into Opus or Codex to do every small task, and we think that okay, because it's so good at complex tasks, that we should only use this. And it's like using a hammer to to hammer in a plastic screw. You will break the plastic screw sometimes. It's
Yeah,
overkill. And
yeah,
that's what I'm saying, that explore. Because eventually, if there's a model you can run on your MacBook or on your computer, or you can rent a GPU and run the model, and it's quite good for what you require. Not everybody requires Opus level performance if you're making just a document, which is with Cowork or OpenClaw, whatever people are using. I'm saying there are models out there. The new Quen models are amazing. The
yes,
Minimax models are amazing. The GLM model, and you're not wasting money. You know, at the end of the day, I want people to benefit from AI, but not cost them an arm and a leg. And you don't need a max plan. You don't
yes.
need this
A
stuff. You can have a,
hundred
you can
percent
have,
agree. Yeah, I mean, I think what 6 months ago we were talking, or even what 4 months ago we were talking about how it's all going to be Apple Silicon all the way, and how Olama is the way to go. Um, and then of course we'll come to the segment again and how things are just flipping, literally just the coin just keeps turning. you know, this is like one of those. It's a Spanish drama because things just keep switching out every 2 months,
yeah,
right?
they do.
The whole thing changes, or even an Indian soap or any soap opera actually, where the
Yeah.
storylines just keep changing and the bad guy's the good guy, the good guy's the bad guy. But the point is that I think it's you need to have a strategy, as I said before, that has multiple choices for your inference provider, for your coding harness. Basically, don't have a vendor lock in at this point. It's too dangerous. It's too risky. If you're going to standardize on anything, standardize. I mean, teach your staff, teach your team to be completely flexible and completely
Yes.
agnostic, right? So,
Yes.
teach them how to basically use coding harnesses because, frankly, all coding harnesses are now the same. They all behave exactly the same way. If you know how to
Yes.
use OpenCode, you can use Claude Code. If you know how to use Codex CLI, you can use Codex,
You,
Claude.
you know, and a very good plan is the open code Go plan is $5 for the first month and $10 post that. It just lets you try out a lot of different models they have. Because they're hosting all of them. So I mean, if somebody wants to just go around and try out, what models are there, play around with it, I'd say we're not sponsored by them. Hopefully, we will be, but Open Code Go is a good one. And
Yeah, I mean, all these guys. I mean, like you said, the challengers are always going to be hungrier. They'll have better pricing. Claude Code is not. I wouldn't call it. It's not getting smug. I think it's. I think it's both panicking and sitting pretty, which is why it's
yeah,
in the position that it's in. Right. It's basically having to throttle its requests, which means you have the Claude apocalypse, which we started with, and it's also acting like it's won the race, which it hasn't, not by a long shot. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great place to close. We had one more sort of, yeah, go ahead.
I think one thing I'd like to say from our prediction of, where we were saying that Apple Silicon will be quite important, and I think we're starting to get to that point because you start realizing that when you got your new MacBook Pro and how you could run models and how everything is developing. I think at the end of the day, you need to own compute, and I think that's what we had emphasized, that you have to have a laptop or a computer or something capable of running just a basic model, because it teaches you a lot more eventually on what it takes to do, why they behave like this, and try and run a model which is too big for your computer. And you'll understand why these companies are suffering, why the cloud apocalypse is happening, why they have peak hour usage things, why they have off time usage benefits, and everything will start making sense to you, because it's just like your machine, and your machine is what you know in your hands is what you control. So eventually, uh, as we said, the labs are going to want more control of what they are producing. It's their product.
Yes.
They're the dealers, right?
They're
And we
the
can only
dealers.
go
They
the
hike up our
dealers.
prices. Just like Amazon did, AWS did it. The minute they had
Google did
driven
it.
off.
Google ads, Meta ads. They're all. Once you get hooked, and
Yes,
we have an option. We have models which can run locally. They're good
yes.
models which can run locally, but
Yeah,
that's
no, I mean it's going to be and it's going to be a bifurcated market. Let's never forget that there'll be people who will be happy to pay premium dollars because they do have them and they want the SLA. The Fortune 500 type clients will say, no, 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 we don't care about saving, money.
like you
We
should.
want quality of service.
If you look
They'll
at Airbnb, they saved 8 million by using Quen as their AI agent, than
wow,
up compared to
Airbnb
using
did. Wow.
Airbnb. 8 million they've saved, and I'll tell you what the thing is. Everybody with co-work, with whatever it is running to a Claude API or an OpenAI API. There are far easier ways to do it. There are far more economical ways to do it, and that's what it is. Claude and OpenAI may be the best two there are out there, but I wouldn't say they're the only thing. So I was saying, imagine a world without them, and how would you do it? Efficiency always comes from need,
Yeah.
and when you have a need is when you find a solution. You don't find solutions when everything's going well. You don't find your
Absolutely,
ideas
absolutely,
don't.
and have a backup plan, have a fallback, because the last thing you want is to be so dependent on one of these providers that you're stuck, because they've had a 2 day outage. So, I mean, risk mitigation is a good strategy for you to have here.
I think on that, where I think everything is heading is things are getting good. I think in terms of understanding and working with these models, I feel like we're getting to a point where they are flattening off a little bit. Their capabilities may get better on the top end, but I think for basic requirements and basic things we're doing day to day, I don't think we'll see that much of a difference, because I think the impact that they've made on our lives is so immense already, is that it hasn't reached many people. So I'm saying everybody will see these changes coming to them and the impact coming to them. But and through the work we're doing and what we're building, we will try to pass these uh, you know abilities on, such as the RAG builder and many other things we're going to be creating. And I think we're at a point right now where you are reaching the point of elasticity, the limit of elasticity, and that's the important thing.
Yeah,
Just
I mean, I don't know where the limit is yet. I think I'll take Dario's word for it. I mean, he still thinks that we're on the steep part of the curve, right? We basically are at the steep part of the exponent. He, by his own admission, has said it's going to flatten out at some point. How close we are to that flattening, we don't know, right? So, first of all, we don't know. But the problem is there's so many bottlenecks even right now that to even realize the true potential of where we are even here, is many many months away.
Many,
So
many months away. No,
so
I think one last final point I'll say is we are hopeful and we are scared because
yes, hopeful and scared is the best way. I go to bed hopeful, or maybe I wake up hopeful and I go to bed scared. It all depends on how my day is gone. But we're in this with everybody. We're just as lost as everybody else is. Maybe we're just a little further ahead than most people. But we don't know where this heads. But we're really enjoying this this journey, and we're thankful that you're with us. Please do send us your comments and feedback. We love to hear from you.
we'd love to hear from you. And uh, I'll just say this. I mean, we started off with this journey not knowing much about what was going on. And, our mindset was always, we will figure it out. And, that's what it is. You just figure it out one day at a time.
Yeah,
And you start realizing that the more you do this, it's not as complicated as it seems, but it's not
yeah.
as simple as it seems either. There's
Well,
always, it's
it's like learning a new language or learning how to ride a bike or basically operating a new tool. There are some quirks, there's an art, there's some muscle memory that comes into it. I think there's some things that you and I do now and take for granted that somebody who's never done it is going to be like, why did you do that? And I couldn't even explain to you, to somebody
yeah,
who's asking me,
like
my
like the
shoulder,
first time
why?
you saw me, the first time you saw me doing all the like the adversarial review and everything,
Yes,
and it was
yes.
just second nature to me. Like, you asked me how have you done this sub agent thing, and I was just like, oh, like, I just froze. I was like, I'll have
Yeah,
to.
he didn't know he had to basically process. Yes. All
So
right, great. So our hour's up. Thanks again for spending time with us, and we'll see you soon. Probably,
thank you for
probably in the
listening,
next few weeks.
viewing, liking, and subscribing. And we will see you very soon. We're trying to keep the cadence up a little quicker because everything's changing very quickly. And we want you to hear it from us first, and we want to give you our thoughts when they're fresh. Have a great day, everyone. Take care. We'll see you
Take
soon.
care, everyone.